G'day everyone. So, following on from my first ever review and looking at Australian watch brands, I decided to gaze further west and found Perth-based watch brand Hay and Hastings. They had some interesting offerings, but I was immediately taken with the simplicity of their classic watch. And once the financial year sale started and discounts kicked in, I managed to pick one up for what I believed to be a great price. It still was a great buy, but I'll talk about that later. But for now, let's get stuck into the review of the Hay and Hastings Classic. So just to kick off the specs on this watch, we've got a case diameter of 41.9mm, a lug-to-lug tip of 48.9mm, case thickness of 12.2mm, lug width of 22mm, comes in at a total weight of 105 grams if you include its rubber strap. Protecting the innards of this piece is a flat sapphire crystal, and powering it is the good old trusty Seiko NH35 movement. So let's talk about the positives of this piece. The biggest positive is that, in my opinion, this watch is the epitome of everyday carry. For starters, you've got this nice white colored dial with silver lume-filled Dauphine hands that are just thick enough to be legible but don't overwhelm the dial. The second hand silver as well, with a pointed arrowhead at the end that reaches out and comes close enough to touching the seconds indices. The colour and lume theme extends to the applied rectangular indices at every hour interval, with two present at the 12 o'clock point for orientation. And just above these indices, we've also got a chapter ring where there are tiny black circles to mark each minute, with a slightly bigger circle to mark every 5-minute interval. There's a date complication at the 3 o'clock position using black text on a white cutout, and the legibility, while small, is still fairly clear. And finally, you have the Hay and Hastings text printed on the dial in the center above the handset, along with the water resistance and automatic text printed underneath. And that's pretty much it. It's simple, legible, inoffensive, and it's clean with a hint of elegance. So you can easily wear this as a casual piece, or in the office, and also as a dress piece, although at a bit of a stretch, admittedly. But one feature I do love is how the light plays with the hands and indices, making them appear lighter or darker depending on the angle and brightness. To cover its base as a sporty timepiece, the case of the Classic uses 316L stainless steel, and water resistance is listed at 200 meters. This has reinforced the presence of a screw-down crown, and speaking of which, the crown is excellent. It's signed the H&H logo, and while there is an absence of guards and the crown does have a bit of presence, the upshot is that it's incredibly easy to grip and manipulate, thanks also in part to its nailing. The push and pull action to wind the movement and set the day, date and time feels solid and smooth, and screwing the crown back in takes almost no effort. On the back of the watch, you've got a display case exhibiting the NH35 movement in action, along with a signed rotor. This probably won't elicit gasps of amazement from many people, but one thing to point out is that the exhibition display also uses a sapphire crystal, and I'm yet to find any watch that offers this feature at this price. And running around that display are more details about the watch, including water resistance, crystal type, case construction, and nation of design assembly. Thanks to the simple design of the Classic, along with its 22mm lug width, this thing is definitely a strap monster. You won't be hard pressed to find straps to fit this thing, and you can dress it up or down or any way you really want. Nearly any colorway you choose will match well with that white dial. And finally, there's also price. The Classic is currently on sale for 199 Australian dollars, and for that price you're getting a heck of a lot of watch. When I bought it about a year ago, I paid 349 Australian, and while there's a small part of me that's kicking myself for not being more patient on waiting for that purchase, even at the higher price I paid, I was still pretty happy with what I got. But it's that price plunge that has me thinking a bit, which moves me into mixed thoughts about this watch. On a Time and Tide review back in 2016, they listed the price of a Classic at 788 Australian dollars. When I checked the prices about 2 years ago, they had lowered them to $549, and even then I was a little bit tempted to buy one, but I actually held out for another year before they dropped the purchase price again to $349. At its current drop to $199 in its past price slashes, it does kind of make me wonder if prices can get any lower or not. The simplicity of the dial, while pleasant to look at, can occasionally make it look a bit humdrum and basic. It sometimes gives me familiar vibes of a Star King dress watch I bought off AliExpress several years ago, which I'd actually sold because I lost interest in its plain appearance. The Classic still has enough character on the dial to make it a bit more interesting, but do be aware that this isn't a watch that's going to get people's attention or make them gasp in amazement. The play of light on the hands and indices can on occasion make them vanish, especially in the brighter lights. A slight tilt of the wrist fixes that problem, but it's something just to be aware of. The people of Hay and Hastings sell their classic line with a choice of either a leather or NATO strap, but on my request they were kind to offer me a rubber strap instead. According to their website, it's Italian made, and in person, the quality feels good and that vanilla scent still lingers on it after a year. So this is definitely a few steps above an entry-level strap. You've also got the Hay and Hastings logo on each end of the strap, along with Australia etched into the clasp to remind you where this piece was designed. But in spite of this, I've actually never worn it. And the reason? In order to have a streamlined look, there are no notch holes on the strap, and in order to get the suitable size, you have to cut away sections of the strap to properly fit the adjustment holes. Maybe for some people they won't mind this, but for me I don't like the idea of having to mangle a strap for a suitable fit. And finally I'll mention the lume. Now this definitely isn't a dive watch, so I wasn't expecting the glow to be at radioactive levels, but I should point out that it's not really powerful. The camera doesn't display it that well, but based on personal experience, it starts off well, but eventually the markers will give up after about 20 minutes, while the hands will go for about an extra 10 minutes before becoming almost illegible. Look, for this type of watch, I think it's acceptable, but it's not that great. Which now leads me to the negatives of this watch. And the thing is, a lot of the bad things I have to say about the Classic are more nitpicks than actual flaws. The bold arrow end on the seconds hand, for instance, is a bit chunky looking and to me appears out of place on the dial. I kind of feel they could have just removed that arrow and put a small counterweight on the other end to give it a more streamlined view, but I guess beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Plus, it's only obvious if you look up close to it. Then there's the case finishing itself, which is brush size but then leads up to a polished bezel edge. It's not a huge deal, but it does make me wonder whether this watch is still trying to debate if it's a dressy or casual piece. And bear in mind that if you decide to wear it as the latter, any marks and scratches you get are going to stand out on that bezel. And finally, some may consider this watch to be a bit of a jack of all trades, but master of none. It's a bit too large to be a proper dress watch, a bit too nice looking to be a sports or beater watch, and not enough lume there or tooly enough to be a proper diver, despite the 200 meters of water resistance. I reckon if they slapped more lume on the hands and markers and shrunk the size down to about 39 to 40 millimeters, it'd probably help give it more versatility in that regard. So at the end of it all, would I recommend this watch? Well, let's just say at the $349 price that I paid, it still represented great value for money and I was still happy with it. But at its current price of $199, this thing is an absolute steal. With its great specifications, its incredible versatility, a modest design and a very low price point for an Australian watch, I seriously cannot recommend this piece enough. If you're in the market for an everyday carry watch, this is one you should definitely check out. But if you have seen something else that offers a similar package at this price point, let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching, eh?